Okay, let's watch this from your Twitter feed here, which everybody can go follow you, RW Malone MD. And you're still there for now. We're not sure your fate for the future, but yeah, let's just watch this real fast, and then we'll talk about it. Who is this? Set this up for us.
So this is the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Okay, I think her name is
Savannah
Walensky.
Guthrie.
Yep, exactly right.
Okay.
The biggest problems with the Delta variant, as you well know, is that even for vaccinated people, we now know you can get a breakthrough infection and you could be spreading it even if you don't feel sick and you have no symptoms, which is one reason we've had this explosive growth in COVID cases this summer. So here's my question. Is there hope, or better yet, data, that getting this third booster shot could actually prevent transmission?
So there's actually hope. We don't have data yet. We do know that the higher levels of protection, certainly in the Alpha variant, resulted in less transmission, and we have not yet seen the data.
Before you get started on what you're going to add there, the thing that concerns me regarding the hope and the data thing is curious to me, like all the employer mandates and just the mandates, not just employers, but like mandates anywhere on hope. It just seems very odd to me if the mandates are all about transmission, which that's how they're selling it, right? I mean, if you want to take personal risk, you should be allowed to take personal risk. I think a lot of people would agree, but it keeps getting pushed as a transmission. Like you have to do your part. You know, you're putting people at risk. You're a murderer, whatever. But if they don't have the data, then how are we doing this mandate thing legally? I guess that's an odd phenomenon to me. But anyway, that's my addition. I'm not sure as intelligent as what you'll have to say.
So the legal side of this is pretty complicated and interesting. I agree. From my standpoint, as somebody who's been trained in regulatory affairs and has been doing vaccine development for 30 years and been through a bunch of products and a bunch of outbreaks, we're in a position, and many others that I talk to all the time, and there are lawyers that are on this like flies right now. We're beyond legal. That the rules no longer apply. The FDA is disregarding its own rules and policies. For instance, they have a standard policy whenever they make a decision, before they make a decision like this on any vaccine, that they convene a vaccine-related advisory group called the VRBPAC. And that is a group of scientists, independent scientists, so they're outside of the influence, ostensibly, of the FDA and the influence that's exerted upon it by the executive branch. And there's also there's a scientific group that reviews it, and then there's public comment. I'm going to read from the FDA's justification on this. This is directly from the letter. Okay, this isn't me making it up. This is no conspiracy theory. We did not refer your application to the Vaccines and Related Biologics Products Advisory Committee because our review of information submitted into your BLA, including the clinical study design and trial results, did not raise concerns or controversial issues that would have benefited from an advisory committee discussion. Now, there's evidence that they made this decision that they weren't going to hold this meeting well before they issued these letters. Okay, so this is preconceived, that they're just going to bypass the standard review process, and their justification for that is that there's no controversy here. However, they managed to drop this authorization immediately before a couple of key papers came out, one from Israel and one from this obscure journal called New England Journal of Medicine, that clearly documented a whole additional spectrum of adverse events, documented the reduced efficacy with Delta, et cetera, et cetera. So they basically seem to have jammed this through so that they can then jam through mandates, including with the Department of Defense and all of our military personnel, for a product for which they have no data for the Delta variant. They admit that. All of the data upon which this is based is for Alpha and Beta. So we all know that this Delta variant is behaving completely differently. It's infecting the vaccinated. The vaccine efficacy is relatively low. In both Great Britain and Israel, a very large fraction of the beds, like 40 to 50%, are being filled by people that were previously vaccinated. So this is another thing we heard from the legacy media, is that, oh, it's only 1% of the beds that are being occupied by the vaccinated. It's this epidemic of the unvaccinated. That's just a flat out lie. That's an untruth. However you want to cast it, it's not true. So the FDA has moved forward with this rather unique dual authorization strategy for the same product, where they've split it in two. They bypass their own standards and procedures. They are applying, they're only looking at the historic data. And then there's about 9 studies that they're forcing BioNTech to do. That for me, as a vaccinologist and clinical development specialist, one of the things I find fascinating is that Pfizer has managed to get the FDA to put all the liability and all the work of managing these many, many studies onto BioNTech. And Pfizer's going to walk away with no liability and all the money that are coming from the government contracts. I mean, it's a great deal if you're Pfizer. No surprise. But in terms of what's going on here, calling this full licensure is rather odd, because there are clauses in here that explicitly state that, for instance, we know nothing about the teratogenicity. That's a fancy word for birth defects. There is a multiple reproduction studies that are required. They're going to take years. The cardiotoxicity study is going to spread out over 5 years until we're really going to know the cardiac risks here. A lot of people are like, well, how does this work? Because Biden and Fauci are saying that we're going to be, if we can get to, so Fauci came on this day when it was issued, and he said, we're going to get to 90%. Remember, it used to be 70%. Now it's 90% vaccine uptake. And first he said on multiple media interviews that that's going to get us back to normal by next fall. And then he was pressed on that, and he backtracked, and he said, no, I mistook, I misspoke. I really meant by next spring. But they're going to do this. The CDC's own data shows that we can't stop the spread of Delta, even if we have 100% uptake, and everybody does a really good job wearing their masks, because Delta is about 3 times more infectious. It's about as infectious as chickenpox is. So any of you that have had chickenpox around, young parents know what I'm talking about. It's insanely infectious. It's got an R0 of 8 approximately. So they now know they can't stop this. And furthermore, the data coming out of Israel right now on the 3rd dose is not encouraging. Here's the problem. Vaccine responses are not linear. More is not necessarily better. There's a thing called high zone tolerance. And you can cause somebody's immune responses to go down by giving them too much antigen. Okay? It's not more is better. But they're willing to go ahead with mandated authoritarian practices. You've got to take the jab and you got to take the 3rd jab without any data. What's going on here? They're winging it. And the thing that gets me is they're acting like we're a bunch of mice. I as a vaccinologist, I cannot believe this. We're in a position where the government feels that it's okay to enforce mandates on us for a 3rd jab with no data. And what they're basically saying is, you guys are going to be the experiment. Get used to it. We have no data, and we're just going to wing it. That's not okay to me. Okay, that is disrespectful at best, and it is absolutely not consistent with CDC and FDA policy. They're going along with things that are completely untested. We're out in crazy land now with no data, based on, I guess, whatever is Dr. Fauci's intuition, which frankly has kind of been where we've been at ever since the start.
If you like this video, don't forget to check out exclusive content on my other platforms. The links are in the description, where there are also links for how you can support my work.